a quiet Arizona neighborhood, a high-tech security system, and an 84-year-old woman who seemingly vanished into thin air. For 56 days, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie has baffled investigators and haunted her family. But tonight, we are breaking new details that change the entire complexion of this case. Sources close to the investigation are now describing a crime scene that is as haunting as it is confusing, because according to them, there almost isn't one. I'm Michelle, and this is the Michelle Report. Before we dive into the forensic contradictions that have left even the FBI flummoxed, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single update as we track the search for Nancy. To understand why this case is currently paralyzing the Pima County Sheriff's Department, you have to understand the physical reality of Nancy Guthrie's home on the night she disappeared. For weeks, the public has imagined a house torn apart, a struggle in the bedroom, furniture overturned, the hallmarks of a violent abduction. But new information from my sources paints a much more chilling and clinical picture. Aside from a very specific trail of blood in the front foyer and the fact that a security camera was ripped from its mount, the interior of that house was pristine. Imagine walking into a home where everything is in its place. The bed is made or perhaps just turned down. The kitchen is quiet. There is no sign of a break-in at the windows. One investigator described it to me in a way that actually made me stop in my tracks. He said that, but for those specific drops of blood leading out the front door, it looked as though Mrs. Guthrie simply got up in the middle of the night and walked out into the desert. That statement is profound because we know Nancy Guthrie couldn't just walk out. This is a woman who, on her best days, struggled to make it to the mailbox. Savannah, her daughter, has been vocal about her mother's limited mobility. So if the house shows no sign of a struggle, how does a woman who can barely walk vanish without a trace? This clean crime scene is exactly what is vexing the FBI and local homicide detectives. It suggests a level of precision or a terrifying lack of forensic footprint that you don't typically see in a standard smash and grab or a random burglary gone wrong. It suggests that whatever happened to Nancy happened quickly, and it happened in a very localized area of the home, the front entrance. My sources indicate that the blood droplets start right inside the threshold of the front door, in that small foyer area. They don't trail from the bedroom. They don't trail from the kitchen. They start right there at the exit. This raises the haunting possibility that Nancy was intercepted the moment she reached the door, or perhaps she was brought to that spot before the violence occurred. But then we have the back door problem. Throughout this investigation, there has been conflicting chatter about how the perpetrator actually entered the home. Savannah Guthrie has mentioned back doors, plural, being propped open. This has led to a massive amount of speculation. Does she mean two separate entrances, or is she referring to the common setup of a heavy security door and a standard wooden door at a single entrance? My investigation has confirmed there are actually 3 back doors to this residence, some hidden under awnings and difficult to see from the street. If the back doors were found open, but the blood is at the front door, we are looking at a very complex movement through the house. The Guthrie children told police that their mother was notorious for leaving her back doors unlocked. It was a habit of a woman who felt safe in her community, a woman who didn't think the world was coming for her. If a predator was watching, perhaps a landscaper or someone familiar with the layout of the neighborhood, they would know exactly where the weakness was. My working theory, based on the physical layout, is that the intruder entered through those unlocked back doors in the dead of night. They may have even disabled the floodlights we saw dangling from the eaves. The intention might have been to take her out the back, toward the garage where a car could be hidden in the shadows. But then, reality set in. Nancy Guthrie is 84. She isn't fast. She isn't agile. If she resisted, or if the intruder realized the trek to the back was too exposed, they may have pivoted. The front door is the path of least resistance. It leads directly to the driveway. It is a straight line, but that straight line is covered by a Nest camera. And that is where the buffoon comes in. The man caught on camera MacGyvering his way through the darkness, trying to blind the very eyes that were watching him. This brings us to the most frustrating piece of news I've uncovered this week. When asking about the progress of the case, wondering if the duck is paddling furiously beneath the surface while looking calm on the water, one investigator's response was blunt and devastating. He said, "We ain't got shit." Now, on the surface, that sounds like a total failure of law enforcement. How can 400 agents, the FBI, and the full weight of the Pima County Sheriff's Department come up empty after 2 months? We are talking about a guy who looked like a buffoon on camera. He wasn't a master assassin. He was a guy with a light in his mouth, smashing a plastic bracket. Yet he has seemingly outmaneuvered the best forensic minds in the country. But there is another way to look at that "we ain't got shit" comment. I spoke with Phil Waters, a retired homicide detective with over 400 cases under his belt. He pointed out that in the mind of a frustrated cop, nothing doesn't literally mean zero evidence. It means they don't have the one thing they need to make an arrest. They have the blood. They have the video. They have the towed car of the daughter Annie, which was processed for DNA. They have 40,000 tips. But without a body, or a confession, or a direct forensic link to a specific suspect, a detective feels like they have nothing. Remember the Idaho 4 case. For 47 days, the public thought the Moscow police were clueless. People were slamming the chief, calling the department incompetent, and claiming the trail had gone cold. In reality, they were tailing Brian Koberger across the state lines and pulling DNA from his father's trash. They had plenty, they just couldn't talk about it. The question is Pima County following the Idaho model, or are they truly staring at a wall? With the blood pattern inside the house matching the pattern outside, and the timeline showing a camera disconnect at 1:47 a.m., followed by a figure appearing at 2:12 a.m., the windows of opportunity are closing. If Nancy was injured in that foyer, perhaps by a zip tie or a blunt force strike, the clock started ticking 56 days ago. The question we have to ask is how a scene with so little forensic noise can exist in a modern home. If you or I were to be taken from our living rooms in the middle of the night, there would be a trail. There would be scuffed floors, a tipped-over lamp, or DNA under a fingernail. But in Nancy Guthrie's home, it was almost as if the house itself was protecting the secret of what happened to her. My conversation with Phil Waters, who spent 23 years in the homicide division, shed some light on this clean scene phenomenon. He told me that sometimes a scene doesn't talk to you right away. You walk in, you look around, and you think there is nothing being said here. But then you bring in the microscopes, you bring in the black lights, and the FBI's evidence recovery teams. Early on, the Pima County deputies might have seen a pristine house, but the FBI sees things differently. They see trace evidence, skin cells on a door handle, a single hair caught in a carpet fiber, or a microscopic droplet of blood that didn't make it to the floor. The fact that the FBI has been back to that house multiple times over the last 56 days tells us one of two things. Either they missed something vital the first time, or they are following a specific lead that requires them to re-verify a physical detail. We saw this play out in real time when a white tent went up in front of the house nearly 2 weeks after Nancy vanished. It was only up for a few hours, and when it came down, the bracket for the front doorbell camera, the one the intruder had been seen manhandling, was gone. Why did it take 2 weeks to take that bracket? Perhaps because they were waiting for a specific type of DNA processing to return from a lab in Florida. We know there was talk of mixed DNA found at the scene. If that DNA came from that bracket, and if it belongs to someone with a criminal record, the "we ain't got shit" comment starts to sound more like a strategic deflection than a literal truth. Let's talk about that 1:47 a.m. timeline. The sheriff has stated that a camera was disconnected at that exact time. But here is the catch. He didn't say it was the front camera. There are cameras inside the Guthrie home, security measures put in place because of Nancy's age and health. If a camera was disconnected inside the house at 1:47, it means the intruder was already in the home. It means they were moving with purpose. Then, at 2:12 a.m., a figure appears on an outdoor camera. That's a 25-minute gap. In those 25 minutes, what happened in that quiet foyer? If there was no struggle, was Nancy unconscious? Was she already deceased? Phil Waters believes that for a woman of her age, even a minor strike to the head would cause a significant amount of blood. The scalp is incredibly vascular. It bleeds like nobody's business, as he put it. If the blood droplets in the foyer and on the walkway indicate a head wound, it's highly likely Nancy wasn't walking out of that house on her own 2 feet. She was likely being carried or dragged. This brings us back to the daughter Annie and the towing of her car. In the early days of any investigation, you work from the inside out. You look at the family first, not because you think they're guilty, but because you have to rule them out to move forward. Annie had dinner with her mother that night. Her car was the last vehicle Nancy was known to be in. When the police towed that car under a warrant, they were looking for one thing: transfer evidence. If Nancy had been in that car after the dinner, even for a moment, and if she was bleeding, that car would tell the story. The fact that no arrests have been made in connection with that vehicle suggests it may have been a dead end, or perhaps the evidence found was consistent with a normal family visit. But the lack of information from Sheriff Nanos on this specific point is fueling the fire of public suspicion. This brings us to the emotional weight of this case. It's easy to get lost in the timelines and the forensics, but we have to remember the human being at the center of this. Nancy Guthrie isn't just a case file. She is a grandmother. She is a mother who loved her garden and her quiet life in Arizona. And then there is Savannah. If you've listened to her speak recently, you can hear the absolute devastation in her voice. It's a mix of heartbreak and a kind of bewildered exhaustion. Imagine being Savannah for a moment. You fly back to New York after visiting your mother, thinking she's safe in her home, only to get a call that she's gone. Not just gone, vanished, under circumstances that make no sense. She talked about the flight back, looking down at the clouds and just wondering, where are you? That is a pain that most of us can't even fathom. It's the not knowing that kills you. If there was a body, there could be a funeral. There could be closure. But without Nancy, the family is living in a permanent state of suspended grief. They are stuck in a loop, replaying the same questions every single day. Why were the back doors open? Why did he take the camera? Did she suffer? These aren't just academic questions for them. They are the walls of the prison they've been living in for 56 days. When an investigator says, "We ain't got shit," he's not just talking about a lack of evidence, he's describing a failure to give this family their mother back. It's a weight that hangs over the entire Pima County community. Every time a neighbor looks at a passing car or hears a noise in the night, they think of Nancy. They think of how easily a life can be erased from a pristine home. The criticism of Sheriff Chris Nanos has reached a boiling point, and rightfully so. His communication has been at best inconsistent and at worst damaging to the integrity of the search. He admitted in his first press conference that he isn't good at this. He isn't used to the global spotlight, but being bad at media is a luxury a sheriff cannot afford when an 84-year-old woman is missing. He gave a timeline, then walked it back. He talked about animals on cameras when it was clearly a human being. He did individual interviews that contradicted his official statements. Phil Waters made a great point during our conversation. Nanos is way out of his wheelhouse. In a high-profile case like this, the sheriff should be the pillar of calm and accuracy. Instead, he has become a distraction. The focus has shifted from finding Nancy Guthrie to questioning the competence of the man leading the search. This is in stark contrast to the Moscow, Idaho investigation. Chief Fry in Moscow faced the same vitriol, the same "you don't know what you're doing" comments from the public. But he stayed the course. He didn't do Jerry Springer-style interviews. He gave the information he needed to give and nothing more. And in the end, he was vindicated. Nanos, however, seems to be fighting a battle on two fronts, one against the perpetrator and one against his own public image. And while he's worried about his past mistakes or his backstory, the trail in Nancy Guthrie's front yard is getting colder. Or is it? Despite the frustration, the FBI doesn't stick around for 56 days if there is truly nothing. They stay because there is a thread, and they are waiting for the moment it finally unspools. If we look at the geography of this crime, we have to look at the gravel, that red Arizona gravel that lines the walkways of these desert homes. My sources have been very specific about the blood trail. It doesn't just stop at the front door. It continues under the archway, down that gravel path, and abruptly ends at the edge of the driveway. In the world of forensics, that stop point is everything. It is the exact GPS coordinate where Nancy Guthrie was moved from the earth and into a vehicle. But here is the detail that keeps me up at night. If there was a car waiting right there, why didn't the neighbors' cameras catch it? Why didn't a Tesla driving by at 2 a.m. record the license plate? It suggests a level of environmental awareness from the buffoon that contradicts his clumsy appearance on the Nest Cam. It suggests he knew exactly where the blind spots were. He knew that if he parked just 6 inches further back, he was invisible. This isn't just a random act, it's a choreographed one. And then there's the MacGyver aspect. We saw him with a light in his mouth. We saw him fumbling with the camera. Some have called him an amateur, but think about it. He successfully disabled the primary eye of that house. He managed to move an 84-year-old woman who may have been bleeding or unconscious down a gravel path in total silence. No neighbors reported screams, no dogs barked. The silence of that night is the loudest piece of evidence we have. It tells us that whoever did this didn't just stumble into Nancy's life. They moved through it like a ghost. The physical toll of an investigation like this on a community cannot be overstated. I've seen it before in high-profile disappearances, where the initial missing posters start to fade under the desert sun, and the yellow police tape is eventually replaced by the mundane reality of a house that is now a monument to a mystery. For the people living on Nancy's street, Every morning they wake up and look at that driveway, they are reminded that a predator walked among them. The psychological impact is a slow burn trauma. It's the grandmother who now double locks her back doors, even though it's 90 degrees out. It's the son who calls his mother 3 times a day just to make sure she picks up. The clean scene at Nancy's house is actually the most terrifying part for the public. If there was a broken window or a forced door, you could tell yourself, I'll just get better locks. But when the scene looks like she just walked out, it implies that the danger is invisible. It implies that the walls of your own home are no longer a sanctuary. This is the human vulnerability I talked about earlier. We spend our lives building these fortresses, these comfortable Arizona retirements, only to realize that a single unlocked door or a well-placed blind spot is all it takes. The pain in the Guthrie family isn't just about the loss of Nancy. It's about the loss of the idea that she was safe. That sense of security was shattered the moment those blood droplets hit the foyer floor. And until there is an arrest, that community is living in a state of collective hypervigilance, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now let's get into the scorned woman theory that Phil Waters mentioned. In a case like this, where the physical evidence is thin or clean, the breakthrough almost always comes from a person. It comes from the girlfriend who noticed her partner came home with a scratch on his face on February 1st. It comes from the ex-wife who saw a strange car in the driveway or heard a whispered conversation. Homicide detectives call it the human element. You can process a scene for 30 hours or 30 days, but a motivated human being with a secret is more powerful than any DNA swab. Someone out there knows why that camera was smashed. Someone knows why Nancy Guthrie was taken. And as the days turn into weeks, that secret becomes a heavy burden. It starts to rot. We've seen it happen in cases that went cold for years, only for a single phone call to blow the whole thing wide open. But we aren't at years yet. We are at 56 days. The pressure is mounting on the inner circle of whoever did this. If this was a botched burglary, there is a partner who is currently terrified. If this was a targeted abduction, there is a witness who is starting to realize they are an accessory to a major crime. The "we ain't got shit" comment might be a literal statement about the forensics, but it's also an invitation. It's a signal to the public that the police need a lead. They need that scorned woman to pick up the phone and end this nightmare for Savannah and her family. One of the most jarring things about the Nancy Guthrie case is the duck analogy I mentioned earlier. Below the surface, the legs are moving, but above the water, it's dead calm. Sometimes that calmness is actually a tactical choice. When a department like Pima County goes silent, it's often because they are building a brick wall case. They don't want to tip their hand. They don't want the suspect to know they found a specific hair or a specific fiber on a back door. But there is a fine line between tactical silence and investigative paralysis. When Sheriff Nanos stops giving press conferences because he doesn't have anything, it creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, conspiracy theories grow like weeds. We've seen the rumors, claims about family involvement, claims about local cover-ups, claims about a serial predator. None of these have been substantiated by my sources, but they exist because the official narrative has a massive hole in it. If the FBI is truly finding nothing inside that house, it suggests the intruder was incredibly careful, perhaps even wearing a suit or covering their tracks with chemicals. But the blood tells a different story. Blood is messy. Blood is hard to hide from a modern forensics team. If the blood pattern is consistent from the foyer to the driveway, it means Nancy was actively bleeding as she was moved. You cannot be careful while moving a bleeding 84-year-old woman. You leave a trail. You leave DNA. The "we ain't got shit" comment simply doesn't square with the physical reality of a blood trail. Somewhere, in a lab or an evidence locker, there is a piece of Nancy Guthrie that is going to lead them to her captor. It's just a matter of who breaks first, the evidence or the suspect. The absolute silence from the Pima County Sheriff's Department in recent days has led to a digital roar from the true crime community. But we have to look at the forensic gap. When an investigator says they have nothing, they are often referring to the lack of a smoking gun DNA profile. In 2026, we expect instant results, CSI-style breakthroughs in 45 minutes. But the reality of a state lab in Arizona is much slower. They are likely processing touch DNA from that doorbell camera bracket as we speak. Think about the physical act of ripping that camera down. Our buffoon suspect had a light in his mouth. He likely sweated. He likely left skin cells on the plastic housing. If he wasn't wearing gloves, or even if he was, the sheer force required to tear a mounted camera from a stucco wall often leaves trace evidence behind. My sources tell me the FBI isn't just looking for blood. They are looking for the invisible signature of the person who touched that house. If that signature matches a profile in CODIS, the "we ain't got shit" narrative ends instantly. But what if he isn't in the system? That is the nightmare scenario for any homicide detective. If this was a first-time offender or someone who has managed to stay under the radar for decades, the DNA is just a string of numbers without a name. This is why the focus on the back doors and the unlocked entrances is so critical. It points to someone with local knowledge, someone who knew Nancy's habits. It points to a predator who didn't need a map because they had already walked that gravel path. The lack of a struggle inside the home suggests that Nancy might have even known her intruder or was so incapacitated by the initial confrontation in the foyer that she couldn't fight back. As we reach day 56, the search for Nancy Guthrie has become a test of endurance for the American public and a devastating reality for her children. We started this video asking how a woman could vanish from a pristine home, and the answer lies in that narrow trail of blood. It is the only honest witness to what happened on February 1st. It tells us there was violence, it tells us there was movement, and it tells us that Nancy Guthrie did not leave her home by choice. To the people of Pima County, your vigilance is the only thing keeping this case from slipping into the cold files. We've seen what happens when the public stops paying attention. The resources dry up, the task forces dissolve, and the silence becomes permanent. But as long as we keep asking why the back doors were open, why the camera was smashed, and why the sheriff is struggling to communicate, the pressure stays on. Nancy Guthrie deserves more than a "we ain't got shit" postscript. She deserves a department that is as relentless as her family. Savannah, Annie, and the rest of the Guthrie family are still waiting for that one phone call, the one that tells them where their mother is. Whether it's a forensic breakthrough from a Florida lab or a tip from a neighbor who saw a strange car idling near that red gravel path, the truth is out there. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. No detail is too small. Even a buffoon makes mistakes, and those mistakes are what lead to justice. Thank you for joining me for this breakdown. If you found this information helpful, please share this video. The more eyes we have on Nancy's face, the harder it is for her story to be forgotten. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Michell Report for continued, in-depth coverage of this developing case. We won't stop until we have answers. I am Michelle. This is the Michell Report. Thank you for watching.